One of the most auspicious transits happens from January 27th to May 31st, 2025. This is when Venus is in its exaltation sign of Pisces. What does it mean? How can you work with it? I'll give you the most important dates and everything in this episode based on my almost 2 decades now in studying astrology, thousands of case studies, and what I found really happens during this Venus and Pisces time and what it means for individuals and all of us, and also what it means when it goes retrograde, which is going to be happening during this time from January to May, and what you can do with it. A lot of Pisces energy going on this year. I'm Jeremy Devins. This is the Quiet Mind Astrology Podcast. If you want to know where Pisces is in your own chart, go to quietmindastrology.com, get your free birth chart, and you'll see where the number 12 is the sign Pisces, 12th sign of the zodiac, and Venus is going to be there. So everybody has Pisces somewhere in their chart, even if you don't have any planets there, even if it's not your rising sun or moon sign. We all have all of the 12 zodiac signs within us and access to all of these energies more or less. And wherever you have more planets, you have more emphasis on that energy. But for all of us, this Pisces energy is being very activated in 25, especially with Venus here in its exaltation sign. So that means Venus, the planet of love, beauty, expression, harmony, what we desire, what we really want in life, is at its highest, strongest, most positive possible expression. Doesn't mean it's always going to be good or easy, but we're going to see how this can play out for us. So first of all, January 27th is when Venus enters Pisces, getting out of Aquarius. So that's actual exaltation point isn't really till the end of Pisces, later in the last nakshatra of Revati. There's 3 nakshatras in each sign. So Venus is starting in Pisces, so it's good. It's just going to keep getting better towards May. And what does it mean better, or what's good about it? Well, this gives us more of a sense of what we really love, what brings us joy, where we feel expansive. Our sense of desire becomes more expansive, less bounded up, less bound up by our anxieties or fears or doubts about ourselves. So this overall, with all the transits this year, is a great year to expand outside of your comfort zone. And by definition, that is where the most growth comes from us, for all of us, when we go outside of what is familiar, safe, and normal and habitual to what is unknown, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes unpleasant, but it leads to new experiences, new perspectives, and growth. And as Bob Dylan said, he who is not busy being born is busy dying. So if we're not exploring and learning about ourselves and expanding, then we're actually not growing. We're actually not alive of life. Life is always growing and expanding. Cells are always multiplying and dividing. So we need this continual growth. And Venus and Pisces gives us a stronger push towards that growth and desire. Now, where it is in your houses is going to determine what area of life this is going to affect more. So just as a quick example, if it's in your 10th house, you're going to have more desire to grow in your career and go outside your comfort zone in your career if it's in your 10th house of career. If it's in your, say, 8th house of things like astrology and the occult and mystical teachings, you're going to have more desire to go outside of your comfort zone into things like new yoga classes, new astrology books and trainings, new communities of transformational work. So that's 8th house. If that was in Venus and Pisces was in your 8th house. So look what house it's in for you. And if you want to understand the houses better, go back to my episodes in the archives about the houses. And then you apply what I'm saying here to your house. And this is how I teach you how to fish rather than just give you the fish. And fish is the symbol of Pisces. So we've got a lot of layers to this metaphor. But if I could just tell you all these things about yourself and each person, but I like to also teach you how to be an astrologer yourself, which a lot of astrologers don't do. So I think it's really empowering when you know how to read this like a language for yourself. So Venus and Pisces in general, Venus, what you love, what you desire, it is considered the royal advisor alongside Jupiter. Jupiter is the advisor of what is wise and smart for us, like the elder energy in our lives, the person who's like, don't do that. I could explain it all to you, but just trust me on this one. Like, that's not the right direction, or just trust me on this. This is the right direction. And there's like a spiritual energy to it, there's an intuitive energy. That's Jupiter's advising energy. Venus's advising energy is more like, what do you really love? What do you really feel called towards? What inspires you? And being in Pisces, it's going beyond what you might perceive as your limitations or your fears or your doubts. It's being willing to explore things that are foreign to you and new concepts. Like if you want to go on a trip to a foreign country and explore a different culture, this is a great time to do it between January 27th to May 31st. If you want to explore more about your sensuality, the second chakra, tantric practices, this is a very favorable time for this. Sacred sexuality, these kind of things. Kundalini yoga, partner yoga, any sort of meditative practice that involves the senses. Like a lot of times, this is in the tantric tradition, like awareness of senses when you're eating, like mindful eating, and having like candles in your meditation practice. There's a sort of version of eye gazing, which is candle gazing, where you keep your eyes focused on a candle through meditation. And it can actually make your eyes water if you do it without blinking too much. And there's a lot of benefits to that. It's an ancient Indian practice that's worth exploring at some point if it calls to you. It's very simple. You just sit and gaze at a candle for a timed amount of time, and it can release a lot of emotion as well, which is Pisces is a water sign. So there's a lot of potential for emotional release throughout this transit. And if there's something that feels stuck in yourself in any way, this is an opportunity to get unstuck, especially emotionally. So if you're like me and find it a little more difficult at times to access your pure emotion without any overthinking or ever analyzing it, this is a time that can sort of break that pattern or that stuck energy. And Venus is about relational energy and what you love. And oftentimes, at least I've noticed for myself and with clients I've worked with, that emotions can get more stuck when you are denying your desire. It's like maybe you'd really love to move to this certain location, but oh, that's not practical. Like that doesn't really make sense. How could I do that? So you kind of talk yourself out of your desire. And then it's a version of sort of placating or numbing the actual feeling that's trying to arise. So maybe the joy of being in this different location. And that's just one example of location, but it could be a certain class you want to take, a book you want to read, a thing you want to buy online. It could be any infinite amount of things of just where you may be having a desire and then doubting it or overthinking it. So Venus in Pisces gives you this energy from the universe, this potential to break out of that stuck energy and just try it. And you learn so much from just trying something. And you might think, maybe I want to get really into pottery, or maybe I want to really get into painting or making music or whatever the thing is. That's Venus. That's the desire awakening in you to try something. So, what I would encourage you to do right now, if you have the space, is to pause this episode and write down a desire inventory. It's something I've talked about a lot. It's one of my favorite ways to work with Venus because Venus is the call to desire, and it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't really matter if you get it or not. What I think is most valuable with working with Venus is to just have connection to it. In the same way, like this idea of it being an advisor, having this communication to this advisor who's like, I think you might like this, try this out. You don't have to do what they say. It's just an option. It's just a suggestion. So when you do this desire inventory, you may find that some things really light you up and some things are just like, sounds like it should light you up and you think you should write it. And maybe been listening to certain people and they're saying you should do this, you should do that, and you're like, yeah, maybe I should. And is this should energy, which is not really desire, it's not really intuition, it's not Jupiter, it's not Venus, it's just really kind of the reactive mind, uh, kind of reacting to external things. It's not really your true authentic expression. And we all have those, certain income amount or certain way like your relationship looks or your family looks or your career or whatever. But Venus, the true expression of it is like authentic and internal and intrinsically motivated. And it may include external things like status or fame or success or recognition or dollar amounts, but that still ideally is coming from an intrinsic motivation of something you feel called towards. And the last thing I'll say before I, again, just kind of laying it out, if you want to pause and do this exercise, is the desire is unavoidable. Like you desire to live, otherwise you would not keep eating and sleeping and socializing and just doing things to stay alive. Like you have to have a desire to live to even exist. So in some of the old Eastern traditions, they talk about getting rid of desire, or that desire is such a big problem, but it's really misunderstood. And if you've listened for a while, you probably know what I'm going to say, but desire itself is not a problem. It's the attachment to the desire that becomes a problem. It's like I can want to have this certain level of success or income or status or external thing. But those are the ones that usually people get hooked on the most. Of like, I need this many followers on Instagram, or I need this many likes, or this many external points of validation. And that's where people often suffer the most because it's such a obviously egoic thing. It's like wanting to be seen a certain way or accepted a certain way. So when we focus on those external things, like I have to have it, and if I don't get it, now my day is ruined, my week is ruined, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm reactive. That's where we suffer. And that's the problem. That's where we create so many problems for ourselves and others, is when we have attachment to the desire. Now, you can have the same desire without the attachment, and then you're free. It's like, okay, I want 10,000 Instagram followers, and I don't get it. Okay, what can I learn from that? Maybe I actually didn't really care about the followers, I actually cared about the connection with people. Or maybe I realized the things I was sharing on Instagram weren't actually authentic, and now I want to realign. And then if the followers come, great. If they don't come, great. Right. So I'm using that as a kind of obvious vanity metric of something people might focus on to accentuate the level of obvious ego in that. For a lot of us, you might notice the sense of who cares if it's 10,000 followers? Like, what's the big deal? But that's one of the examples of way we can get kind of hooked on this external validation or external status or number or thing that we think is somehow we need that. Somehow we just maybe heard it. It's okay, 10,000. It's a nice round number. It sounds good. Must be a good person if 10,000 people follow me, right? There's so many ways that we can use that to bolster our sense of pride or ego. Ego is just a ideal sort of idealized version of ourselves that's really attached to forms. And this Venus and Pisces transit is about breaking those forms, breaking the patterns, giving us opportunities to go outside of our comfort zone and follow what we really truly want. And what you really want might actually turn out to be the opposite, that you don't even want to use social media anymore. You don't like it. It's not fun. And that's actually what's true. And you stop. Or maybe what's true is that you want to have more time with your family, or actually you want to have less time with your family and you want to have more time for your work or more time for yourself. So there's no right or wrong to this, but I went on a little longer than I intended there. So if you want to just do the exercise, that's it. You just literally write, I want blank, I want blank, I want blank. Set a timer for 15 minutes. If that feels too long, do 5 minutes. But the longer you go, usually you get to the deeper ones and the true ones, which are beyond the ego and the external things that you maybe think you should want or somebody said you should. So when you're ready, you can pause this recording and just write your desire inventory. So if you didn't do that, that's okay. If you did, great. And then you can go through it. If you did the exercise, if you want to do it later, that's fine. But if you did it, then go through and find the maybe 3 to 5 that really feel alive to you. Doesn't have to be like this big, exciting, reactive thing. Sometimes that's actually a sign of the attachment and it's going to lead to problems, but it should feel good, like to focus on that and put your attention there. Like, I want to help this many people. I want to volunteer at this place. I want to donate this much money. I want to create this much thing in my project or my work. I want to have a date night every week with my spouse. I want to have time with my kids every Tuesday at 7 or, whatever the thing is. So find those 3 to 5 things that feel the most authentic to you and then just put it on your calendar. Find time to do that thing. So if it's writing a book, you're going to need some time to write some pages. So the book's not going to happen if you don't have time in your life where you're writing pages. So when are you going to write those pages? Or whatever the project is, make time for it. And then now you're putting it into the action, which is where kind of the opposite energy of Virgo is like the daily actions, which may be a little bit harder to access right now as K2's in Virgo. So there is a lot through this energy of through January through May of like kind of going with the flow, connecting more to serotonin rather than dopamine, the energy of like love, connection versus the energy of achieving a goal and outcome and setting tasks and accomplishing them. That's more dopamine. Serotonin's more like connection, eating chocolate, listening to music, lighting candles, these kind of sensual things, working with the senses, having incense going, stuff like that. So overall, this is a more serotonin kind of energy through this transit, January through May. But now the big twist on all of this is on March 2nd, Venus will go retrograde for over a month until April 13th. Now, if you're looking for the dates for this, check the description or your inbox because I'm sending this out to people who receive my weekly emails. If you're not getting those, go to quietmindastrology.com. You can sign up for those weekly emails. But March 2nd to April 13th, Venus is retrograde. Now, this happens roughly every 2 years, and it means that Venus is now going back from our perspective on Earth. It never literally goes backwards, it's always going forwards. But from our perspective on Earth, it looks like it's going backwards in the same way when you're driving on a highway. If you're going faster than the car next to you, it looks like the car next to you is going backwards, but you're both going forwards. So, what this often indicates is a time to slow down, to redo things, to revisit things, to review things. And you may need to rehash some issues in relationships, go back to past issues. If you're single, you may find the zombies coming out of the woodwork and people from your past, exes, suddenly want to reconnect. If you're single, you may find new love interests sparking, and it seems really exciting and interesting. But I would not recommend starting a relationship or progressing a relationship during Venus retrograde. What does progressing mean? Well, that's like engagement, marriage, having a child, these kind of things, trying to conceive. These are all things that progress a relationship forward when the planet of relationships, Venus, is going backwards. So you're just likely to encounter more issues. I've seen a lot of these things have major setbacks and issues, breakups, divorces later on when they're initiated during the retrograde. So that's my warning based on thousands of case studies. What I've seen is you're likely to have things be more of an issue if you try to progress relationships forward during the Venus retrograde. But that said, every transit has a favorable and unfavorable expression. So if that's discouraging to you, it's just not the right time for that one thing or those kinds of things. But it's a great time for other kinds of things, like going back through your relationship history to learn lessons about it, journaling about it, therapy, counseling. I talked about this process I did 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now. That was like a relationship chronology. And now I'm forgetting. Maybe I did it during Venus retrograde, or it was a Venus transit for me that was more personal like this. But especially during the retrograde, it's a great time to do this. Basically, you start with your oldest memory of a relationship. And for me, I was like 5 years old. This girl liked me, and she just acted like we were kids. We didn't know what we're doing, but kind of started to act like boyfriend girlfriend, like holding hands and stuff. So that's my first memory, and start there, and then go forward. So everything you remember from your first person that you had some sort of relational, romantic something with, it doesn't always have to be like boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, but it could be like best friend or somebody you learned a lot about relationships from. But you just go forward one at a time through your history. Now, I did this in a container with somebody kind of guiding it, but that's the process. And if it feels calling to you, I would highly recommend it. I think it's something everybody should do at some point, probably around at least after 30, after the Saturn return, because you've got enough time to start to see some patterns and have some perspective on it. But it's an opportunity to just lay it all out. Like a lot of times, at least for me, that there were so many things I thought were complete. Like, oh yeah, I know what happened here. I remember this. If you just ask me about it, I could just tell you like A, B, C, and D, and that was that. But then when I actually did this deeper dive into it, there was so much more. It was like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that was also like ABC with this person and this thing and this part of myself, and then like touching so much deeper emotion in it because it was not just like this logical linear series of events. It was like this emotional experience again. And there was some unresolved, unfelt, unhealed parts of myself in that process. So if it feels calling to you, like just trust it and go for it. If it doesn't feel calling to you, then don't worry about it, whatever, move on. But I would definitely recommend it to everybody. It's so powerful. And again, it's like working with the energy of the Venus retrograde of what's here. It is not the time to start the new story and the new relationship and get married and go forward and all this possibility, because usually when there's a retrograde, it's also that you're not seeing things fully clearly in that area, and you're going to have to go back over it, which is what literally happens in the skies, that Venus is going to go back over the same area when it goes direct, and you're going to have to revisit that same energy that you went through with this new perspective, and you're going to see you missed some things, you didn't see things clearly, mostly if you're working against it, if you're trying to move forward and progress relationship stuff. Now, focusing on relationships here, obviously, this could also apply to other aspects of Venus, like your creative expression, your artistic projects, especially if you are an artist of some sort and you have like a body of work that needs attention, like some unfinished projects, unfinished paintings, unfinished art projects. Great time to go back through those things. And maybe there's some you need to throw out and delete, some you need to finish up, and you might not finish all of them at this time, but it's a good time to go back over your creative projects and artistic expression as well. If you used to have a hobby like playing music or drawing or something, and you haven't done that in years, it's a great time to dust off the art supplies and get back to it, even if it's just one time. It can really spark such a deep connection to your sense of expression and your emotion and your love again, because Venus is that part of ourselves where so many songs, if you just look at the lyrics of like 90% of songs, they're about love and relationships in some form. So it's so close. Like Venus and relationships these are the same general energies. So oftentimes art itself is about love and what we love and where we feel the most expressed from our hearts and our emotions, which usually comes through relationships. Not always, but generally speaking. And also, this is a great time for redecorating, remodeling, improving your garden, your home. If you like interior design, if you like feng shui, this is one of the best times to go back over things. If you want to do some sort of remodeling in the house, this is good. If you want to renovate, all the RE words, that's a good key to this, and things to do with Venus, beauty, love, art. And again, this retrograde time is just over a month. So March 2nd to April 13th, and then Venus goes direct again in Pisces, and it stays there all the way to May 31st. So we got this longer stretch of Venus and Pisces and its exaltation sign from January 27th to May 31st. And now we'll talk about this last phase of it, which is April 13th to May 31st. And during that time, it's again, you're going forward on this stuff. So that is a time where if you want to progress a relationship, if you want to start new projects, creative, artistic projects, that's great. If you want to learn more about yourself and your sexual expression, your sensuality, what you love to do, this is a great time to do it. Tantric practices are amazing. If you're newer to it, I like Mantak Chia's books, especially for men. Mantak Chia has a lot of great books for men and cultivating sexual energy. Venus, the planet of love. Pisces is about going beyond the self. And this is often experienced through the sexual experience or tantric experiences. And tantra, the word is often associated with like literal sexuality in the West, but it means to loom or to weave or to connect. And it's like seeing the connection in all things. And that includes everything. So most often directly through the polarity of male, female, man, woman, of yin yang. So it's one of the more powerful ways to engage with the tantric energy, but we all have that within us, regardless of your sex. We all have potential access to yin and yang, masculine, feminine within ourselves. So you can do this solo or with a partner. Partner practices, if you are in partnership, can be very powerful during this time. And this, what I'm saying, also applies to the beginning, January 27th to March 2nd, and then the second half when these are the times Venus is direct. So you can learn so much about yourself, what you really want in your relationships. A lot of tantric practices too is about clarity of desire, which I've done a lot of this work myself and guiding others through it as well. And it's actually very uncomfortable for a lot of people. Like not anything sexual either. Like just to ask for what you want, just to know what you want. I think there's a lot of reasons potentially, like in the conditioning of the West, it's like you just go to school. Who cares what you want? You go to school. You follow the rules. You pass the test. Don't step out of line. It's not a lot of freedom of expression or creativity or space for you to really connect to what you really want, other than, well, if you want to keep graduating, you need to pass this test. So you're gonna have to follow all these rules and memorize all these things. So I think a lot of ways the Western world and the education system sort of standardizes everybody to standardized tests and standardized rules and ways of being. So it can become easy to lose touch of individualization, not standardization, but just myself. And I definitely have aspects of that I've struggled with over the years, and just learning to really know what is right for me and my own needs and boundaries and desires. And I've seen it in so many clients, and I think it's a very normal thing to experience. But this transit is an invitation to reconnect to that and to go beyond what we think we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be, what rules are supposed to follow. And the desire inventory I mentioned earlier is a great way to just open that channel. And if this is something that calls to you, if you struggle with it, just to do that as a regular practice, maybe throughout this whole transit, if you really want to go fall in with it. But at least with some regularity, I do this maybe like once a month on average, just to kind of get that channel open and make sure I'm connected to it, of like, just everything down to what do I do in the average day? Am I doing what I really want to do? Is this current? Or am I just kind of coasting now on a pattern I've created in the past? Or am I really enjoying like the food I'm eating, or just the general schedule and my flow of the day? Is there something I want to be doing more of, something I want to be doing less of? And I think it's good to also not attach this to buying stuff. In the West, something I've noticed having moved to Mexico is how much in America is like professional consumerism is like a part-time job for everybody in America. It's like, the prices of all these different things. You're always comparison shopping, finding the best price, knowing the best prices in town for this and that. And it's just markets and stores everywhere, and Amazon, just instantly get anything you want. So there's a very consumer mindset in the West where the desire is kind of hijacked by, well, what are you going to buy? Christmas is like, what are you going to buy for other people? It's a gift. You got to go to a store and buy something. That's the acceptable gift, rather than doing something or an act of service or an experience as much. Now, I'm generally broadly speaking here, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You can probably relate to some degree. So as you explore your desire through this transit, be aware if you're getting caught in just like buying stuff, consumer desire. And that's fine. That's great. I enjoy that part too. It's nice to have nice stuff. Absolutely. Venus loves luxury, nice stuff. And Pisces, it's like, it can be a little reckless, even, of like, who cares? Just have whatever you want. Eat cake and ice cream every day. Just go to the nice spa. Just like spend, spend, spend. And then when Venus gets to Aries, you might start to see some of the consequences of that. And like, and especially when it gets to Taurus, later this year, the practicalities of managing finances. But it's important to be aware of that too. With Venus and Pisces, there can be some escapism, some need to just like get high on things like sexuality or buying stuff or just enjoying the senses. So keeping it a bit grounded might be a challenge, as we're going to have this big stellium in Pisces at the end of March, and then Venus is there still through that, and Saturn's going to Pisces. So Pisces is like the strongest energy of this year. So having a spiritual practice is very, very favorable, as always. But with Venus and Pisces, having some sort of sensual, working with the senses, spiritual practice is extra favorable. Now, this can include a mala practice. We're using touch, the sense of touch, and sound, your voice, to chant a mantra. And you can also look at the mantra and have a beautiful mala. So you're using the sense of sight as well. Of course, remember, sensual does not mean sexual. Sensual just means using the senses. So if you're doing like a mala mantra practice, that's a great way to work with Venus and Pisces, using the senses. And you add in some incense, now you got the sense of smell, and it can be really, really nice. And otherwise, you could also do partner practices. So if you are in a relationship, Mantak Chia's books have some great partner practices, sitting in yab with your partner, breathing together. That's where you're basically like cross-legged, sitting with each other and eye gazing, breathing together. This is now synchronizing the polarity of the yin and yang of within each of you and within each other to circulate energy and create this immense energy together. It's like circuit of it's it's just like the power of life. It's the power that creates life, of where we're all born from, that union of yin and yang and masculine and feminine. So when you cultivate that, you can use that for any creative endeavor, any creative project or energy. So that's really powerful. And again, Montauk Chia's books are a great resource for this kind of stuff. There are lots of Tantra books. I don't have one I recommend. I probably should pick one, but I can't say one that I would say is like a good go-to. But Montauk Chia's I really like. And maybe in your community, there's a great Tantra teacher around there that you might find. I should probably have a better reference or someone I could recommend, which I'll look into more of, like who I could recommend people to for that. I've done a lot of this training myself and find it super valuable. And it's like harnessing the Venus and Pisces energy for its most auspicious expression, which is infinite creativity. And it's going beyond the limits of what maybe you thought possible in the past. So that goes all the way through May 31st. And then Venus goes into Aries, where now it's like action, fire. It's going into the restart of the zodiac cycle, from the last sign to the first sign. There's a Gandanta point there too at the end of May, where you unlock a knot that's been stuck in your relationships. So this is very exciting. And I appreciate if you stayed with me this long in the podcast. It's worth it because at the end of May, you're untying a knot of karma that has been there for potentially lifetimes, potentially generations through your family lineage, ways of relating that no longer serve you. If you're doing this work consciously, you can untie that karmic knot and just start a whole new way of relating in relationships, in your creative expression, in your connection to your own sensuality and your desire of what you really want in life at this time now. And if you're not doing this work, for those people who are not listening to this podcast and not into this kind of stuff, it's likely to tighten that knot up. So when you go through the Gandanta point, you become very aware of where the energy is stuck. And where Pisces is in your chart, that's the house it's affecting, that's the general energy it's affecting. And that knot can become tighter. Like if you have the knot in your shoelace and you can pull it and make it tighter, or you can loosen it up and untie it. This is an opportunity around the end of May, basically like the last week of May to the first week of June. This is where the Gandanta energy is most affected. And you can untie a knot that's been stuck karmically for generations. Specifically what it means, well, we can go into that in a one-to-one reading. You can look at the houses placed for yourself, but this is the broad general thing for everybody. It's an opportunity to start new, to start fresh, to reconnect to what you really do love and your desires now, presently, at this point by the end of May, which is always evolving. And if you do the desire inventory, you'll see that it's always changing. And if you don't know any other Eastern traditions and Taoism and Indian traditions, Hinduism, they talk about desire as the attachment to desire as the root of suffering, especially because desire is so continually changing. You might really want this way of relating, and then a year later, you really want something else. And if you're really attached to like needing to fulfill every desire you have, you're going to be running around a lot and you're going to lack the big picture of Jupiter, the other advisor. We need Jupiter too, right? That's a different topic for a different episode. We have Jupiter transits coming up this year, I'll talk about later. But that's the other part. And then there's the Saturn, the grounded maturity and the wisdom of like what's good for the long term. Venus is more short term. It's more in the moment. It's more fickle, more potential for destructive behavior because it's like, what do I want now? What do I want now? And if you track it, it just changes a lot. Similar to the moon energy, the mind is always changing. So Venus, we want to connect to something that we can really feel in our hearts because when you follow your heart, it's usually a longer term sustainable thing. You follow your heart, you usually end up going in the direction of your dharma and your purpose and something more sustainable. And yeah, the heart can change and the emotions change variably. They can change very fast. And the more you sit in meditation, the more you see that it just changes fast. So don't get too attached to that. But with Venus and Pisces, there can be some escapism and tendency towards things like drugs, highs, sex addiction, drug addiction, love addiction, and being too free and freewheeling and just open and just spontaneous and losing track of time and losing yourself in Venus and Pisces. So if you notice you're going in that direction, the inauspicious expressions, then you focus on the auspicious expressions, which I focused on for most of this episode. So you got a lot to work with there. And you can come back to your desire inventory to see what's true now. You can do your relationship chronology to see the patterns of your relationships during Venus retrograde. So you don't have to repeat them to learn the lesson. You can just review them to learn the lesson. And then you can move forward when Venus is in Aries, undoing the karmic knot at the end of May, beginning of June, and now start new of like, what do you feel lit up about? Venus in Aries is a passionate, exciting, fiery energy to start new things and follow your heart at a new level. And when we get there, we'll talk about that in May. But hopefully this is helpful for you today. If you enjoy it, leave a review, share it with a friend, and look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology Podcast.